Hi, and welcome to Smart Training 365. This is Mo Larbi, and I'm with Doug Brignoli.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Doug, how you doing?
Good, Mo. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So, Doug, today we're going to talk about the pullover.
I never know what you're going to talk about.
Yes. So
you like to keep me off guard.
And that's something that many people ask for it. They say like, oh, you will have like a higher chest, and your stomach will, shrink, So even if you have a little belly, doing pullover will change that look.
Okay.
So we're going to go through that. Also, we're going to talk about the pistol squat.
Okay.
And those who have that, Q, what is that? The Q of the valgus?
Oh, yeah. Q angle.
Q angle.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about TRX for muscle growth. There's a couple of exercises that I recorded. So if you're new to this channel, subscribe. You're going to learn a lot. We highly recommend it. So, Doug, what do you think of the pullover exercise in general? And let's start with the machine.
Okay. Actually, what I should say, even though you want to start with the machine, is that the machine came from the original. And the original was, for those of you that don't know, you take a flat bench and you lay across it. Instead of like on it, you lay across it, and you take a dumbbell and you bring it behind and over. And as you bring the dumbbell back, you bring the hips down and it arches your back. And then from that, Arthur Jones invented this pullover machine. But in order to evaluate the machine, you have to say, well, what was the first exercise intended to do? And I was in that era, right? I grew up in the 70s. I started weight training in 74, 75. And, there was a lot of talk of the pullover and a lot of, there was probably more mythology then than there is now. And that's part of the mythology. And we were all told that pullovers would make your rib cage bigger, that it would expand your rib cage. And we'd be instructed to take a deep breath and then hold it and bring it back, right? Well, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, because separate from the rib cage issue is the muscle issue. So we'll talk about the muscle issue in just a second. Can we expand the rib cage? And the first thing we have to acknowledge is that bone is pretty hard. Right? I mean, let's just basically let's take a simple question. If you pull on your forearm for 5 minutes every day, will you make your forearm longer? Probably not. Right now, even if you pull on that forearm with a lot of force, in other words, if you had someone somehow attach your wrist to, a machine, or somehow could pull with 50, 60, 70 pounds of force, you would start to wonder if maybe you'll damage the bone or the tendon or something with that much force. So the question is, again, can you expand bone? Can you change the shape of bone? And expansion of the ribs, of the rib cage, theoretically is basically not only making the bone bigger, but changing its shape, right? So imagine that bone was soft and you could climb inside somebody's rib cage and you could push out against that cage with a lot of force. You still could not expand that rib cage, even if you got inside and pushed out. So this is what's bizarre. Number one, we're not pushing out on the rib cage, and we're not even grabbing the ribs and directly and pulling them out, right? You're doing something that the ribs don't even know is happening. You're moving your arms at the shoulder joint. And yes, when you inhale and you hold your breath, it expands the lungs, but the lungs don't occupy the entire space inside the rib cage. You have organs in there. You have all kinds of things there. The lungs maybe occupy maybe 1/3 of the space, not even half of the space inside the rib cage. So imagine that the lungs were occupied the entire rib cage. There were no organs in there. and you had a tube and you can blow into the lungs, and you went, and you pushed out in with this balloon inside the rib cage, you still could not make the rib cage bigger. You still could not do it. So the idea was absurd. The idea that you can expand the rib cage. And then they would show us pictures of my cats, who always had a big rib cage. And then they would show a picture of him doing pullovers. Well, everyone did pullovers, whether you had a big rib cage or not. Just so happened that the people with the rib cage were shown doing that exercise, and then we assumed. But there's just no way, logically, there's just no way that you can actually make that rib box bigger, even if you could push out from the inside, even if you could grab the ribs and pull them out from the outside, and certainly not at all by moving the shoulder joint. So the idea of expanding the rib cage with pullovers is just ridiculous, just ridiculous. We don't hear about it too much anymore, but there are still some people out there that believe in old school, and they will swear by it. But if you just stop and think about it logically, it's just, as I said, even if you could fill the inside of the rib cage with a balloon and inflate it to capacity, you still would not be able to change the dimensions of the bone. It would be very, very, very difficult. And of course, that's not what a pullover is. Pullover doesn't even come close to that. So getting to your question, I'm sorry, the question about the machine, when Arthur Jones invented the machine, he provided a cam. That was the basis of Nautilus machines, an oblong pulley, which of course, changes the resistance through an exercise's range of motion, because when the cable rides along the smaller part of the wheel, it gives less resistance. And when it swings around the longer part of the wheel, it increases the resistance. So what he would do is he would take the pullover, and you would strap in, by the way, you would have a seat belt, and you would go down and you'd pull in this direction. And of course you had more resistance at the bottom than you would with dumbbells. In fact, you couldn't even do that with a dumbbell, right? Once you get to the apex, which we talk about in our program, once you get to the top, you're no longer pulling. Now the dumbbell would fall towards your feet, right? And then you need your deltoids to get it back up again. Anyway, the rule in biomechanics, and this is an absolute rule, all muscles pull toward their origin. They can do nothing other than pull toward their origin. So one of the things we do when we teach you how to evaluate an exercise, and of course, some of this depends on you understanding how we're put together, what muscles are connected where. We say, toward what muscle origin is that movement going? Right? So if you're doing a one-arm row, you say, well, this is the bone that's moving. What's it moving toward? What muscle origin is it moving toward? Some people would say, well, I thought it was a lat exercise. I'd say, okay, well, you thought it was a lat exercise, but are you moving toward the origin of the lats? If you're going like this, you're going that way. The lats origin is on the spine. You're not moving toward the spine. That's the reason why one-arm dumbbell row, one of the reasons why it's not a good lat exercise. But when you're doing a pullover, again, you're not moving toward the lat origins. The lat origins are on the spine, and the fibers run diagonally from the lower 2/3 of the spine and the back part of the pelvis up at a diagonal, connect to the upper part of the upper arm. And so they pull in a downward direction. So when you're doing a pullover, yes, the lats will participate to some degree, but you're not moving toward the lower 1/3 of the spine. So it's not a good lat exercise either. And it's certainly not a good natural motion for the shoulders. That's not the way our shoulders. Can they move that way? Yes. I can also do a curl behind my back, right? That doesn't mean I should.
Also, some people say that this exercise, if you modify the position of your arms, you can make it a chest exercise.
Oh,
so for the viewers, I recorded the video. So let's look at the video, and I will comment while it's playing. So this is the options that you talked about with the dumbbell. And I set exactly like you said, on the bench,
Right.
And
You're
as you
across the
see,
bench. Your hips are dropping down when you're bringing the dumbbell back.
right. And
Uh-huh.
it's advisable here to always keep your hips low,
Right.
because you get more stretch.
Well, you certainly can't stretch your abs. That's for sure.
Yeah. And here is the barbell option. Same
Oh
thing.
my God.
I know
That
you
looks
love
painful.
to do this.
Wow. That is really, really unnatural for the shoulder joint to move like that.
But I'm working my lats.
Supposedly.
Yes. So if you keep, for example, your elbows in and stretch your arms far back, you work in the lats. If you flare out and you keep the dumbbell closer to your body like this, you work in the chest. So it's up to you. If it's on your chest day, do this option. If it's a back day, then do it with this option.
That's what they say, huh?
Yes.
Okay, look, let me just explain a couple of things. Again, we're going to go back. All muscles pull toward their origin. Okay, so let's take that rule and apply it to the lats, and then we'll apply it to the chest. Okay, so the lats, if you were holding onto a lat fiber, let's just say you are a little man standing on this person's lower spine, and you're holding one of these ropes, which is a lat fiber. And that rope goes up, crosses this guy's shoulder joint, connects to that arm. Now you're going to pull that arm down. You're going to pull it as far as possible, right? This is what our goal is when we work our muscles. We want to contract the muscle fully. That means shorten the muscle as much as possible. The question is, where would your arm end up when your lats are fully shortened? Right up against the side of your body. That's as far as those little lat muscle fibers can pull that arm. When it's pulling into the spine, that's it. That's where you end up, right? Now, does this look anything like where you ended up on your pullovers? You're nowhere near this, right? So clearly you are not moving your arms toward the midline of the body, towards the spine, and you're certainly not moving it maximally toward the spine. Now, the other side of that coin is you're moving it as close to the origin as possible, and then on the eccentric, you're moving it as far away from the origin as possible. So which direction would you have to move in order to move farthest away from the lower spine and the hips? Out and up. Not back here. Out and up out there. And then pulling in. That's the motion of the lats. So clearly, that movement you just did is not this. And what you have to ask yourself is, yes, it involves the lats, right? The lats participate 20%, 13%, a little. Is that enough to call it a lat exercise? I mean, why bother with anything that's less than 90% lats? If your intention is to work lats, I wouldn't even do an exercise that is a 60% lats. If the goal is to work the lats, just don't even bother with it. It's just a waste of time. It's almost like saying, look, my objective is to get 500 milligrams of vitamin C. I have the option of taking that 500 milligram vitamin C pill, or I have the option of taking this 20 milligram vitamin C plus this 60% vitamin C plus this 45 milligram vitamin C. Why try to piece it together and use all the energy that it requires to do all these different diluted exercises when you can just do the undiluted, maximally good exercise and be done with it? Now, let's talk about pecs. Again, all muscles pull toward their origin. Where are the origins? They are on the sternum. A little bit, 10% of your pecs are on your collarbone, and 10% are on your ribs, called the costal fibers. And these are the clavicular fibers. These are called the sternal fibers, right? But they're all toward the center of the body. And these pectoral fibers go out and connect to the upper part of my arm right here. So when this insertion moves towards the origin, it's going to move toward the midline of the body. And then when it moves away from the origin, it's going to move laterally out there. Okay, so if you're doing a pullover, yes, I mean, to some degree, because your arms are in this, yes, there's a little, but you're not opening up. And you're also not closing up. You're not elongating the pectoral muscle, and you're not shortening the pectoral muscle. Are they involved a little bit? Well, yeah, that would be like saying my pecs are involved a little bit when I'm doing planks. But it's like, but I'm not opening up, but I'm not fully contracting.
Not
so
dynamic.
Again, there's just no reason to do an exercise that isn't maximally productive for that muscle. Why bother with it?
So your conclusion to those who think that this exercise works the chest and the back is avoid completely this exercise. It's a waste of time.
I would have a hard time giving the pullover even a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10 rating. It is that useless. Not only is it that useless, but it's also really risky on the shoulder joint. So when you combine, an uncomfortable exercise that is risky on the shoulder joint with literally no benefit to the pecs and marginally, I mean, you'd get more lat stimulation by doing tricep pushdowns. Just because you have to hold your arms in place. Yeah. I mean, literally the lat pull down the pullover is really not at all a good exercise.
Sorry to bother you with this exercise. So look, there is 2 questions that I can see coming in the comment section, which are Arnold, Frank, all these people did pull over, and what will you say about that? That's the question number 1. And question number 2 is, well, if I feel my lats working, that doesn't mean that I'm getting a good workout.
Well, when you come back on a lat pull down, on a pullover, I keep
pullover,
saying
yeah. Sorry.
When you do that, you can actually feel your lat stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to deny that you feel a stretch. There is no lat contraction for obvious reasons, because your arm is not ending up alongside your body. That is you can do this right here at home as you're watching this. Just pull your arm in and push it, squeeze it against your side, and you will feel your lat contract. That is the place where the lat muscle contracts. So, when you do a deadlift, you feel a hamstring stretch, but that is not a good way to build the hamstrings, right? If I pull my arm back like this, I can feel my bicep stretch, but that would not be a good way to build my bicep. If I laid down on a flat bench and I brought a pair of dumbbells down with my arms straight and then did this, I would feel my bicep stretch, but that is not the way to build. You need to bend your elbow. You need to shorten that muscle. Growth happens more with the contraction, the shortening of the muscle, than it does with the stretching. So the idea that you're going to build your lats because you're stretching your lats, that's just not reality. Look, here's the thing is I don't want to, criticize people who recommend these exercises, because this has been the conventional wisdom. Over the years, I started doing this in 1974, 75. And fortunately, I was always a very curious person, and I would question everything. And I always asked why. If that's true, why and how does it do that? I remember one time I saw Muscular Development magazine had an exercise of the month, and there was an illustration, and the illustration was always a beautifully muscular, caricature of a guy, and he was doing a flat bench, but instead of going up straight up with dumbbells, he was going at an angle. In other words, he was doing an incline angle, even though he was not on an incline bench, right? Well, now, if you read our book or take our course, you know that anytime you move your anatomical limb in a direction other than directly opposite resistance, the alignment is going to be off. And when the alignment is off, there's all kinds of things that result from that. Number one is you're not going to target the muscle you think you're targeting. As I've said a million times, what loads your muscle is not your movement. It is the direction of the resistance. So if I stand in front of a mirror, as I've seen people do, they stand in front of a mirror, they take a pair of dumbbells, and they push the dumbbells toward the mirror. And they say, I'm working my pecs. Well, this is the direction my pecs move my arms. Yes, but gravity is not pulling me in the opposite direction. Gravity is pulling down. So my deltoids are holding it up, and my pecs are completely unchallenged. So just because someone says this works should prompt you to say, how does that work? Or why would that be the case? Right? Physics tells us what works. Physics tells us what's what. And when you're doing a pullover exercise, all you have to do is just know a few of the basics about physics and anatomical function. And you would quickly say, that doesn't make any sense.
Some people might ask, what is the purpose of all this that we're talking about? The biomechanics, the direction of motion, the resistance curve. Who cares about this? You're still going to work out and you're going to get results. What do you say to that?
Look, that's a very good question. Our program is 100% about efficiency. It's getting the most benefit for the least investment of risk and energy. Who wouldn't want that? If you're going to make an investment of money, you wouldn't want to invest a ton of money for a little reward, right? Because obviously, if you invest a lot of money, you stand to lose a lot of money, right? So usually when you make investments, the amount of reward should be what they say commensurate, equal to the amount of risk, right? So you take a big risk, you better get a big reward, right? So that's why in money matters, what you want to do is you want to invest the smallest amount and get the biggest return on your investment. So we use the same principle here. We want to get the biggest percentage of benefit to the muscle and the least risk to the joints involved and the least amount of wasted energy and effort.
What's the biggest benefit to the muscle? What does it mean?
Well, most of the people that are listening to the program are bodybuilding. And when I say bodybuilding, I don't necessarily mean competing. We are building the muscle, right? We're strengthening the muscle, but I don't know very many people that say, I only want to strengthen the muscle. I don't want it to get any bigger. Most of us would know that a good physique requires shoulders that are developed larger, pectorals that are developed larger, biceps, triceps, lats. That's what gives you the contour. That's what gives you the shape. If your objective, and most people who are doing weight training's objective is to build the body, you want to figure out how you can make that muscle grow the best with the least investment of energy and the least investment of risk.
Thank you, Doug. So for those who want to find out about your book, they can find it on dougbrignoli.com and purchase it there. They can have the options to have it signed or not signed.
Right.
How long is the delivery?
Well, it depends. If it's in the United States, it could be anywhere between 2 days and a week. If it's outside the United States, it could be, who knows? Every country has a different delivery system, right? So the U.S. Postal Service takes it to the country of destination and then hands it to their delivery system. Sometimes it takes a month. Sometimes it takes 3 weeks. Sometimes it takes 2 months. It's different. If you have an international purchase, if you want me to send you the book internationally, then you have two options. One option is to get it through the most economical requires that your country have a good delivery system. And if you don't believe your country has a good delivery system, then FedEx will take it right to your door, but it'll cost considerably more, about 3 times more.
All right. And for those who wants to check out our online program, whether it's the Physics of Fitness online program, True Bodybuilding, the webinar, or what else? The Brick 20, yes. They can find them on Smart
what is the bodybuilding course? True Bodybuilding?
Yeah, True Bodybuilding. They can find them all in Smart Training 365 or in the description of this video. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you very much.